once I finished cutting out my orange pennant, I kind of thought that even with the S that I was going to be placing on one of them, and the other, I made two of them, and the other one is going to have, this one's going to have a Y. But after I finished cutting this out, I realized it seems like it needed something else. It was just a little too plain, and so I decided a simple way to add a little texture was to basically punch, you can see here, I'll zoom in, these holes using my paper piercing tool all the way around. And it adds just a little bit of dimension and interest. I kind of like that. So I'm going to show you how I did that. I used one of the templates out of the paper piercing pack, I guess. Yeah, paper piercing pack. And it's just this one. It has some different designs. But this one, this bottom portion of the template allows you to do some straight lines of hole punches. And I just placed this right over my pennant. And if you can see here, let me zoom in just a little bit more. This line, there's a line that goes around the template. And I made sure that that line was lined up right on top of the top edge of my pennant, as well as the left side edge of the pennant. There's a line that goes all the way around. And then after I did that, I didn't want it to, I don't like things wiggling on me while I'm working. So once again, I got some, let me zoom back out now a little bit. So I don't like things wiggling around, so I'm going to place some of my blue painter's tape. And be careful not to put the tape on your cardstock, because that will, even though it's nice and forgiving on your other tools and such, it's not so forgiving on the cardstock. It can peel up, it can actually tear your paper a little bit. So then I used the paper piercing tool as well as the piercing mat. And I just started to, I used the very first line of holes, both at the top and at the side, and I just started piercing all the way around. And when I got to, so that's the first line of holes. And when I got to the bottom portion of the pennant, I actually brought it up a little bit. You could stay at the first row of holes, but sort of had a happy accident. I ended up, for some reason on the bottom portion of my pennant, I ended up going one row higher on the dots, so basically 2 rows in, and that's why there's a little bit more of a margin here. But either way, it looks, I think it still looks good. I'm keeping it, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to make my second pennant the same way. So basically, like I said, this is how you would just add this decorative dimension, and you just go all the way around. Okay, now the template is only going to allow you to go around so far onto your pennant, poking holes, so you'll have to stop and move your template, align it again, and then continue punching your holes. But I wanted to just point out that when you line it up, you want to also make sure that the holes on the template line up with the previous holes that you've already done, so that when you continue on, your holes are going to be the same distance. You're not going to end up with a couple of them right on top of each other or too far spaced apart. Okay, now to show you how I sponged on the letters for my message. I did one, got it all lined up the way I wanted it, and then for each subsequent pennant, I'd take a finished one and line it up next to the one I'm going to work on next. I use the top edge of the one pennant and line up the other one so that they're completely next to each other, parallel. And then I'd place, in this case, since this one's going to have my paper pennant attached as well, I wanted to make sure that this is going to be in the position that I want it to be. So I put the cardstock on top of the canvas pennant in the position, the distance down that I wanted it, make sure it was centered right to left. And I can even take my rosette and put that up on top here and see that yes, this is where I'm going to want to put that. Okay, so it's nice and centered. And then I take my letter template and holding everything still, sort of slip the letter stencil, excuse me, slip the stencil right on top, and then position my stencil so that my next letter is going to be lined up right where I want it. So once I got that right where I wanted it, I think that looks like a good spot right there. And then I have to make sure, eyeball the right edge line of my stencil with the right edge line of my cardstock, which I can see through the stencil, and making sure that they too are parallel, because I don't want my letter to be a little cockeyed one way or the other. So once I get that where I wanted it, then I can move my other pieces, hold this together, slide everything out of the way, and once again, handy painter's tape, and just tape that down. I'll use some of this piece. I use basic gray on all of my letters. I think it looks so nice. As you can see, you saw the K there a minute ago. And just hold this steady. Press down on your stencil so that you don't accidentally get ink leaking out in any spot underneath the stencil where you don't want it. And so forth. But I'm not going to finish doing the entire letter on camera, but just so you get an idea, that's how I did the letters. And I did the same thing with all of the other pennants, lined them up next to each other so that I can make sure that the placement of each letter was uniformly, across, horizontally on from pennant to pennant. Everything looked even, so that it's not like I had one letter way up here, one letter way down. That's how I got everything lined up. Okay, now to add the pieces onto our canvas pennants, what I did was I did one first, and once again I take a finished one, such as this K pennant, and I lined it up with the one I'm going to work on next. And of course, in this case, this particular pennant, I have my orange pennant on top. And so once I got my cardstock lined up where I wanted it, I just lifted up a little bit and just put a good old dollop all the way across here where I know my orange pennant is going to lay, and then press that down. And then I could also determine where I wanted my rosette. Again, I want to line it up with the previous one. Once I get an idea where I'd like that, then on the back side of my rosette, remember I have that 1-inch circle punch of black cardstock that was used to hold it together. So right on that piece of cardstock, I'm going to put a big old dollop. Nice, healthy, generous dollop of hot glue. And then, sure, again, I have everything lined up where I want it. Make sure my skull is nice and straight. And then press and hold for just a few moments. And that's how I adhered all the pieces onto each canvas pennant. Okay, so once you got all of your pennants, your canvas pennants made and decorated and embellished, and you got everything the way you want them, then you're going to want to string them all together and to make your banner. And there is a Stampin' Up! Video on YouTube that illustrates, it's a very condensed, basic video, there's 2 of them, that illustrate how to create these banners, but they leave a lot out. And so I wanted to be sure that in my video I was explaining everything step by step, including how to string it together. Because you may be wondering, well, how do I tie this jute from piece to piece? And I can show you a very easy way to do that. Your kit will come with 9 feet of jute twine, and so you're going to want to lay all of your pennants out and then feed your jute starting with your very first canvas pennant. You're going to go in, and I wouldn't cut any jute yet. Just take the end of the big bolt, the bunch of jute that you get in the kit, and just take the one end And on every pennant, you're going to go in the left grommet and come out the right grommet. So in the left, the jute will lay behind it, and then up through the right grommet. So in the left grommet, up the right grommet. Same thing. In the left grommet, up the right grommet. In the left, up the right, and continue until you get all the way to the end. And then what you're also going to do then is you're going to then move your jute and your pennants along the jute so that they're evenly spaced to the distance that you want. Now you might want them a little bit closer together, maybe a little bit farther apart. For mine, they're all approximately about an inch apart, but it's not a perfect measurement. It's not, doesn't have to be super exact. Just about an inch is what I did mine. And then when you get down to the end, now see, this one I haven't done yet. I'm going to show you. I'm going to go in, well, I'm saying it wrong, down the left grommet, down through the left grommet, up through the right grommet. And once again, I'm going to pull this pull my jute through so that I have about an inch. And at the end, I'm going to make sure that I have enough to have about a loop about so big. So let's see, how much does this measure? Oh, I'd say maybe about 5-6 inches of jute at the end. And then what I did on both ends is grabbed the jute and made a loop, such as this. And then hold it together, take my loop, wrap it around my finger. Basically, I'm going to tie a knot using that loop. Now, there's probably some sort of a technical name for this type of knot that I am not as familiar with. Maybe it's a slip knot. I don't quote me, I don't know. But then you just pull it tight so that you have this little loop. And that way, this allows you to hang your banner onto maybe a hook. Then in between each of these, right basically at the top of on the jute, at the top of by every grommet, I tied some ribbon. Now remember, you get a bunch of ribbon with the Halloween banner kit. That's an additional purchase. And that way, if you tie like a knot right at the top of each grommet, and I did double knots, just 2 overhand knots, doubled them up, so it's nice and tight. And that way, it's going to keep your pennants from moving around too much when they're hanging on the wall. So please check out my blog to get all of the ordering information and detailed instructions for making this craft at stampyourway.blogspot.com. Until next time, happy crafting.